Well, welcome, Mr. Shoaib Sultan Khan, today to our Dev Talks episode. It's a pleasure and honor to have you here, considering how successful you've been with beginning, initiating development projects all over South Asia. So our first question for you is, could you just explain how you got started in development work and where did your career begin?
My God, if I'm going to recall that, it will take all your time. I was brought up by my maternal grandfather who was in the civil service, so I wanted to join the civil service, which I joined in 1955. And then I came across a visionary who was mentioned by us, Dr. Hamid Khan. And what I'm doing now, I really learned all from him, which was really how to help the rural poor and how to reduce poverty. So that was really after I had put in more than nearly 25 years in the civil service. And so Hamid Khan then became my mentor. Because when I got a chance to implement a rural development program called the Aga Khan Rural Support Program, it was in the northern areas of Pakistan. So Hamid Khan used to come regularly. In fact, he wrote about 12 reports on his various visits, which are basically a, let's say, a textbook for rural development. And that was it. So Riaz must have told you because he knows all about my work and all about what I have been doing. So basically, I institutionalized this work by starting what we call the rural support programs. So now all over Pakistan, there are these 7 rural support programs, which are independent and autonomous, but there is a network, we call it RSPN, Rural Support Program Network. So where all the programs can meet and sort of exchange their views and their experience and learn from each other. So that's what really is the origin of this program.
Shoaib, I just want to know, you went there in Gilgit in December 1982, and then you started holding community dialogues. Can you give us some idea of how many dialogues you held in the first year when you were there in Gilgit with the mountain communities?
When you have compiled my NFRs, you know it better. Because, the basic issue is that how do you help the poor? You cannot help them individually because there are too many. So the main approach which I learned from Attorney Khan was that you have to form a development partnership with the poor. And there, in the partnership, there are obligations on both sides, on both the parties. The ones whom we are trying to benefit and the ones who are trying to benefit. So the first thing was that unless and until the poor agree to organize, you can't do a thing. But do mostly for a few individuals. So in the obligations, the first thing was that they should agree, the communities should agree to get organized. And as capital is power, so they must also learn how to acquire capital because, as they say, rupee attracts rupee, so they must also learn how to generate their own capital so that it can attract capital from outside also. That is, savings became an important issue there. And obviously, if you're trying to help the poor to improve their livelihood, who's going to tell them really that how they can improve their livelihood? I mean, the question is there are two approaches. One is a blueprint that you think that you can tell them what to do and improve their livelihood. And the second is a process approach where you ask them what you think you can do and why are you not able to do it? What are the obstacles, the hurdles? And that is here where you help them in removing those hurdles. So you see, it's a very, very simple approach in a sense, but basically, as Ramit Khan used to say, it's as precise as the law of gravity. If you deviate, then you will end up in building crooked walls, not what you are trying to achieve.
If this is so easy, how come Pakistani communities just seem to get poorer and poorer over time? Why don't we see a decrease in poverty nationally?
No, it sounds easy, but the main thing is because they need this support. And unless there is a support organization which is prepared to help them overcome the obstacles and hurdles that they are facing.
Can you describe what these obstacles and hurdles are? What are these communities facing that are preventing them from moving out of poverty?
Well, the first thing, of course, is that they would say we don't have capital. And then they also can tell you the solution that what they are capable of doing. And if you help them in doing that, then obviously they rise above the level of subsistence.
Okay. And my other question, which you were talking about, is communities' willingness to organize. Could you elaborate on what that means exactly?
I mean, the willingness is basically, as I said, that if they don't organize, then we can't reach everyone. So they agree to organize. Then, as I said earlier, that they must agree to generate their own capital through a discipline of savings. If they don't do that, then they will not be able to attract capital from outside. And thirdly, which totally depends on them, that each one of them, now the ones they get organized, what we call, each one of them has to make a micro investment plan as to how they can improve their livelihood and what are the obstacles in the way. So that's how the approach goes.
Have you met communities that are unwilling to organize?
Well, if you're not willing to organize, then we can do nothing. Then we go on to others. But what happens is that there is always a demonstration effect. Once you go, I mean, if you go to, you see, the whole basis of this program is dialogue. And dialogue not with a few people, but dialogue with the whole village. And I mean, there are some villagers who immediately accept it and agree and do what we're asking them to do as their obligations. And the others, of course, I mean, either they are not convinced or they have a policy of wait and see. But when they see some of these organized villages and what they have achieved and what they are doing, then you know, as they say, that from a seller's market, you get into a buyer's market. And they start coming to you. But why don't you come and organize us? So that's how it goes.
Shoaib sir, if you allow me, I want to say a little about this, and then we can move to India. For example, by 1992, it was established that your program had doubled the income of 100,000 families that you were trying to help. And the secret behind this was that you asked every community to identify one intervention which will raise the income of most of the families in that area. And as it happened, most of them identified bringing a water channel to their unirrigated lands, which doubled the size of land which came under irrigation. And that was a very simple indicator which showed that their income doubled. And that is when the outside world recognized this. All the World Bank, just 4 years after you started, rated it as the best rural development program in the world. And they said these are 4 years lost to the rest of the world because they were not aware of this approach. And then for the first time, Prime Minister of Pakistan, he picked the phone and he called you to congratulate you on this achievement. But then UNDP saw its strategic significance and they asked you to expand it to South Asia. So could you share something about what happened in India and how it was different from Pakistan?
Well, I think Manur, I mean, Fayaz knows much more than I do. Tell all about my work. So basically, what Fayaz is saying is that is how it happened. And it is all a question of finding people who would believe in this. And Fayaz also knows here also in Pakistan, it was all, I mean, I alone could not have done anything unless and until I would have been able to find people who believed in this and then did it. And then every program, for example, there are now about 7 rural support programs in Pakistan. I mean, all that I had to find out were these 7 people who would really not only understand but be dedicated and believe in this whole thing. And that is what happened in India also. Because there also I was lucky to find one person. He was an IAS officer, Raju, and I brought him to Pakistan and took him to Gilgit and showed him what is happening there. And he said that this is the first time that we have come to believe that yes, people can do a lot. Otherwise, our entire approach is always that they don't know what to do and we should tell them what should be done. So basically, Faz, it was a question of finding people. And fortunately, in India, I found K. Raju was the IAS officer. And then he was able to find others who also thought in the same way. And then, I mean, when he went to the central government, he was able to persuade the Planning Commission of India to launch what they called Rural Livelihood Mission, where they tried to approach almost 300 million households.
Want to go to one of Kapula Raju's statement that he made when he came to Islamabad. Because I accompanied you to Andhra also to see how they're working. But what was very interesting was he said once that when you went to India, they asked you to tell them your precondition for success. And they said, we don't want to hear 6 months from now that their program has not succeeded. because your conditions were not met. Because in the beginning, they must have apprehensions, And you told them that just give me one village where people want to rise above poverty level and they're willing to organize. And you said that I will just show this and then it will spread. So can you say something about how things started and took off from there?
Obviously fails because obviously, you see, it is a approach where there is a nucleus and then around it you build. And for that, you cannot go and start it. For example, initially they told me that we would like you to take up maybe 1 million people and work with them. And I had to then persuade them that, look, it's not a question of doing with 1 million people or 10 million people. The first thing is the one to show that it can be done in one village. And then if it is there that you learn what things have to be done, what are the obstacles which may come in your way. And then once you have perfected that, then obviously that also becomes a demonstration and then you can expand it to wherever you want. The main thing was that first one had to see what was happening, what was there. And in India, there was a program of self-help groups, 15 women getting organized. And then they were asked to save money. And at the end of about 6 months, each group was given about 25,000 rupees. But then they divided the 25,000 in 15 and that came to nothing. After all, the whole thing, disappeared. But what we did, we took up the same groups and we said, all right, but you just accept these three conditions, which were really, you're already organized, but you should have a discipline of savings. And the savings should really be your capital. We should attract capital from the outside. And then obviously, each one of you has to have a micro investment plan to then see what you can do and how you can rise above the level of subsistence. So whatever was there, we tried to then basically reorient it instead of just saying getting organized, save a rupee a day, and after 6 months we'll give you 25,000 rupees. Well, that doesn't get them anywhere except that it just starts and then it fizzles out. And that's what happened in India. And of course, in Andhra Pradesh, it went up to 11 million households. The big program.
Perhaps one thing we want to know is that there was 25,000, which was not enough for 15 people. So how did you solve that, providing them access to more credit? Of course, the savings they did, I think, they used as collateral to get credit line from the banks or government. One transition which was made from Gilgit to India was that in Gilgit, the program was mostly people what identified was building a local micro infrastructure in the form of water channels. What happened in India was that credit line was seen as the major challenge in the way of women members of small self-help groups. So the program under your guidance tried to cross that barrier, providing them credits, microcredit, which you said initially it was 25,000 for the whole group, but it was too small. So how was that solved? that problem?
You know, this World Bank, when it came to assess the RSP after 5 years, its first comment was that the first 4 years of this program are the missed 4 years of all rural development programs being implemented, because they all go with a blueprint approach, where this program has adopted a process approach. So, you know, that is the main thing, that instead of you going and saying that this is what you should do, this will improve your livelihood, basically you ask them that what do you think? That you think that you can improve your livelihood, and why you're not able to do it. So, you know, so this was the difference between that is what the World Bank pointed out, between the rural development programs that were being implemented and this one which was implemented here. And you are going to ask people what they can do to improve their livelihood. I mean, as you earlier said, in Pakistan, of course, they had the whole village had a lot of barren land. And they said that, well, it is infrastructure which became their priority. That if you help us bring water, and when I said, from where are you going to bring the water? And then they said, well, look at these glaciers that we have. We'll tap the glaciers and bring the water. Now, obviously, in India, there were no glaciers, there was no land. So and they already, as I mentioned to you, that they had this program of self-help groups where 15 women got organized and saved for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, they were given 25,000 rupees. And that was the end of the program. But what the same groups started doing when we started working with them was basically bringing in these principles which we're asking them to follow. That it's not a question of just uh, a sort of time-bound project. It's a program. So you will have to have organization, you will have to have this discipline of savings, and you will have to have these micro investment plans for each household. So, you know, that was the difference between the earlier approach and this approach.
Last thing unless Mahnoor has another question, I want to ask about is that how this idea of local support organization was transferred from India to Pakistan. Because first your approach was taken there, and then this new tier of local support organization, which they developed there, you brought it back to Pakistan. So could you say something and your final comments?
Well, obviously, you know, I was learning what was happening in Pakistan, and then how it was basically improved or oriented in a different way in India. And then I would try to then bring the innovations or the good things from one to the other. So initially, it was from Pakistan that I took the principles and program. But then basically, it was from India that the improvements that we were introducing in Pakistan were from the experience that I got there.
One last thing, Shoaib Saab, I just want to make a statement, and you can tell me how to what extent I'm correct. I think when the banks provided credit line to these local support organizations, I think they charged no interest on that. but local support organizations charged 5% interest when they gave it to beneficiaries so that they could cover their own overhead cost. And that made these LSOs or local support organizations sustainable. Is this statement correct?
Yes,
This summary?
they were able to get, because Government of India had also a directive to all the banks to give rural credit at a concessional rate. So they will get this at 7%, and then they will give it out to the members at 12%. So that's how they will make it.
Thank you.
Thank you.